distinguished chairman of the University Grants Commission, and a wonderful audience that is assembled here for the 10th edition of ThinkEdu. A very good afternoon to all of you, and it's going to be a really intellectual pre-lunch session. And in this session, we have a lot of ideas, preconceived ideas, and a lot of expectations from the new education policy. And if there is one institution that can bring together all resources under its command to convert this policy into actionable agenda, one such organization is the University Grants Commission. And there can be no person more appropriate than the chairman himself to come and address this afternoon's session on educating Indians for the next century. The new education policy, the third version that we have with us today, if you look at the first one, the 1968, was at a time when education was in the Union list. And then came the 1986 education policy, followed by the Program of Action in 1992. But that time the education was in the concurrent list. Now, what characterizes very significantly and makes this NEP 2020 special is the definition of education itself has changed. And how much visionary have the makers of NEP 2020 have been in capturing the changing dimensions and the paradigm shift of education, which has been accelerated by the COVID pandemic, is something that we have to internalize and understand. The NEP 2020, I'm sure, the shelf life of that is going to be longer than the previous two versions of the nation's education policy. And that is why the topic is to think for the next century. Educating, again, that's a very broad-based terminology. Education in a philosophical sense is to transmit civilizational knowledge. But the way in which education is getting defined, redefined, and will continuously be evolving in the right sense of what it is supposed to be, we need to understand that it includes unlearning, new learning, relearning, continuous learning, skilling, training, vocational education, all sorts of possibilities that can fit under the very broad terminology of educating the learners. Second, Indians. Again, are they learners within the geographical construct of India, or do we have the capacity and potential to reach out to learners outside the geographical boundaries of India? Or is it only for Indians in India? Or is NEP 2020 having enough to take education to Indians outside India? Or maybe non-Indians in India and non-Indians outside India? And talking about this topic, I recall 5-6 years back when Mr. Prabhu Chalap sandwiched me between two tempestually powerful speakers, Sri Dattatreya Hosabole, and that time a very senior academic himself, when we talked about whether education is actually igniting enough nationalism. And that's when I recall the term that I used, hyphenated Indians, because there are many Indians who are Indo-American, Indo-English, Indo-European and so on. So, Anglophile. So the definition of Indians is also getting changed. And lastly, what type of education? And I distinctly remember, and I have wrote about this also in the New Indian Express, when the Pearson group came out with a report titled "An Avalanche is Coming in the Sphere of Higher Education." It cautioned all the stakeholders of the higher education ecosystem that there is not going to be one formula that's going to fix the problems of education. And we need all types of education, all types of educational institutions. We need universities that are research universities. We need universities that are going to be teaching universities. We need open universities. We need skill universities. We need distance learning universities. So we need all types of universities. And the delivery mechanism also has to be mixed, hybrid, online, distance, phygital. And that's the new coinage when Mr. N. Chandrasekharan, again 5 years back when he took over as the chairman of Tata Sons, in a very interesting discussion that I personally had with him on this very same stage on ThinkEdu, came the new terminology, phygital education. So it's going to be a hybrid model of physical and digital. So ladies and gentlemen, this NEP 2020, as I had written in a couple of articles, that it is kind of an educational program that has the potential to deliver results beyond our generation. And that is why I said its shelf life, maybe I wouldn't be surprised that it could exceed the second or the third generation from now. And that's why I view this NEP 2020 as a Midas touch golden policy, that it has modularity in it, it has interdisciplinarity in it, it accommodates diversity, accessibility, and more importantly, sustainability. And that is why we have to plan for a century ahead of time. And ladies and gentlemen, to understand how NEP 2020 can educate Indians for the next century, please put your hands together and welcome Professor Jagadesh Kumar, the chairman of the University Grants Commission, who in his opening remarks, the keynote address, will lay down the contours of what he thinks NEP 2020 has in store on the topic at hand today, after which we will take this session forward with an interactive question and answers. Thank you.
Vaidya, you spoke about NEP. Do you know what TNBT is?
TNPT.
TNBT. Ma'am, do you know what is TNBT is? The next big thing. NEP is the next big thing. And we are going to talk about that. You know, when I walk into the classroom, I teach, by the way, semiconductor manufacturing. And my students, they are told that the technology is moving from 45 nanometers to 22 nanometers, 10 nanometers. And today we are talking about 7, 5, and 3 nanometers technologies. So I tell my students, the technology will keep evolving. But what doesn't change is the fundamentals which drive this technology. So as a teacher, my role is to make you good in understanding these fundamentals. So what we will do today is, through our question answer session, we will try to distill the national education policy and focus on the fundamentals so that you will appreciate the importance of national education policy. You know, this session was supposed to be after the lunch, but now it is before the lunch. You are all hungry. So, Vaidya, I request you, please ask me tough questions.
Sure.
Don't be easy on me.
Sure.
But before I distill this national education policy, I want to tell you a small parable, 19th century parable. Do you know Anand Kumar?
Yep.
Who is he?
The politician Anand Kumar? Or?
No. Anand Kumar is a different person.
Okay.
I will make him popular now.
Okay.
You know, Anand Kumar, he was lost in a forest. For a week, he roamed around. He couldn't find a way out. And suddenly, on the 7th day, he saw another man walking towards him. He was so happy. And they introduced with each other. And the other person happened to be Venkatraman. And Anand Kumar said, last 1 week I was searching for my way in this forest. I could not find my way. But in any case, don't follow the path that I followed. It will not take you anywhere. Venkatraman said, the same is true with me. For the last 1 week, I was lost in this forest. I was trying to find a way out. I couldn't find a way. And don't follow the path that I followed. And then both of them, Anand Kumar and Venkatraman, they decide, let us join our hands together. Let us find the path and a way out of this forest. Anand Kumar represents the center. Venkatraman represents the states. You know that education is in the concurrent list. If you want to effectively implement the national education policy, it is very, very important that both the center and the states across the country, they work hand in hand. This is very, very, important. And this is also a very great opportunity to set our goals high. If you set your goals low, you will not achieve much. And this is the greatest opportunity for us. As he said, there were so many education commissions and reports came, but nothing much happened. But today we have a vision, a road, a path laid out for us to improve our educational system. Shall I tell you one more small story?
Please.
Anand Kumar had a pet cat. And as usual at lunchtime, this pet cat was very hungry. It came out of the house and looked at the left side. It saw a mouse there. It was completely frozen. It appeared it was completely frozen out of fear. And it was about to jump there to catch the mouse, but suddenly it heard sound from the right side. And when it looked at that side, there was a bigger mouse. It was not at all afraid. It was looking at the cat and nibbling something. In a split of a second, the cat has to make a decision. Which way to go? The easier one or that one? The cat made a decision. It jumped on the mouse which appeared to be frozen in fear. And there was a surprise. There was no blood. There was no flesh. It happened to be just a mouse toy. This is what happens if you set lower goals. And this is the right time for us to set our goals high so that, our educational sector will become one of the best in the world. Now, during the presentation, Kaveri asked, what do our young people want? The topic of our discussion is very interesting. Educating Indians for the next century, and how do you do it? But before we think about that, we need to answer the question that Kaveri has asked. What do the youngsters want? Vaidya and myself, we interact with the students all the time. Every day we keep interacting. And we know, we can guess what is that they want, what is there in their minds. Let me tell you a few things, and I want to know if you agree or disagree with that. Today's young people, they want to be effective learners, and they want to be lifelong learners. They want to acquire the ability to critically think. They want to be problem solvers and solution providers. They want to be creative and innovative. And they want to take risks and learn from their mistakes. Do you agree with me? Is this not what our young people want?
There are many youngsters at the back. Yes or no?
Yeah. Yes, this is what our young people want. And more than that, our young people, they also want to be effective communicators. They also want to take the opportunities very importantly and act upon it. They want to know how to build teams and lead those teams. And more importantly, they want to become responsible and good citizens. Don't you agree? This is what they want. Don't you agree with me? Or do you disagree? Do you disagree with me?
Agree or disagree?
You don't disagree with me. This is what our young people want. Now, if you look back at the educational system that we had, do you think that educational system really geared up to meet the aspirations of our young people? And it's a clear no. Because if you see whether it is in India or globally, our higher educational system is so rigid. It has failed to meet the needs of our students. Today, our students we know that the students have divergent cognitive abilities. They have different financial capabilities. They have different aspirations. So how to make our higher educational institutions relevant to the needs and aspirations of our young people? And that is the challenge that we have in front of us. And the national education policy lays down the path to realize the aspirations of our young people. And there are many, many things that the national education policy speaks about. Just as the technology is evolving, we may have many things in the national education policy, but if you want to come down to the fundamentals of this national education policy, there are only few fundamentals, and we need to revolve around these fundamentals. Number one, access. Right? Everybody should have good access to high quality education. Access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability. These are the fundamentals on which the national education policy is built upon. And as a regulator, I believe that UGC University Grants Commission should be a facilitator for the growth of education in our country. It should not be stifling with all kinds of regulations and rules and say this cannot be done, that cannot be done. We should be looking at the opportunities and say, let us do this, let us do that. And this is how I think a regulator should function. And I would like to assure, because he introduced me as the chairperson of UGC, but let me tell you, I'm a teacher first and anything else later.
Yep.
But as a chairman of UGC, I would like to assure that we will do everything possible to make sure that the national education policy is implemented in the shortest time possible so that the youngsters in our country will become great, creative, and innovative people. So I think with these comments, I can stop and go ahead and shoot your questions.
Yeah. Sir, as much as, every teacher would want to give the best to the student, and I'm sure the teacher in you should now start thinking, as chairman of UGC, now what should I do to ensure that the best of the potentials of all universities and higher education institutions are uncorked? Because the new education policy has a lot of things, too many things, too little time to react and jump into action.
Right.
And the moment universities, which technically universities are supposed to be empowered academic bodies, but the way in which universities are being characterized and the way in which statutory bodies through their regulations and guidelines telling universities what to do, what not to do. And just an example, India, I think, is the only country where institutions are declared as institutions of national importance, institutions of eminence, not by performance, but by majority in the legislature or through a notification. Now, how are we going to flip this model? And how is UGC going to empower universities and higher education institutions to really enjoy the autonomy that NEP 2020 aspires to give it? Because it is cannulated through these higher education institutions to satisfy the dreams of the aspirational learners.
Right. Vaidya, do you know mousetrap syndrome? You know it?
Yep, the repeat exercise.
Mousetrap syndrome, does anybody know? I'm sure all of you must have used the mousetrap, right? The simple one, the wooden one with a door spring, and you put something there, and when the mouse comes, the door will close. And this was invented sometime in 1890s. And since then, there have been more than 50,000 patents on improved mousetraps. But you don't buy them. You still go and buy this simple mousetrap. You go to T Nagar if you are in Chennai, or you go to Sarojini Nagar if you are in Delhi, and buy the same old one which was so old. Why? Because people are not aware about the new technologies. And if somebody thinks that my idea is so great, people will fall and then adopt it, that is what is called the mousetrap syndrome. The same thing can happen with the national education policy. There is a great need for us to create awareness among our stakeholders. And this we have been doing during last 1 year or so. We have been holding several webinars and seminars and writing in media and so on to educate the people. But when I go to a district, when I go to a small college, I find that people are still not aware about the ingredients of the national education policy. I think Vaidya, people like you and me, and then Prabhu Chawlaji, by conducting programs like this, we need to disseminate the information on the national education policy. I think that's the first thing that we need to do.
Now let's assume that that dissemination is happening. How long you think that should happen before real action starts happening? I mean, because there are some best practices that predate even NEP 2020.
Right.
So how can we create a multiplier effect using NEP 2020 so that these best practices can further reach to those institutions that have been craving for this for quite some time? So dissemination is going to be a continuous process, but action has to start and we need to start running. So when can we start running?
So let me take one example. Things can be explained by taking examples. Multidisciplinary education. This is a top priority in our national education policy. If you have seen in the media and also on UGC website, recently we have issued the guidelines on how to introduce multidisciplinary education in our educational institutes. I will give you one example. Often we wait for somebody to nudge to do things. Multidisciplinary education is one example. But to give you another example, when I was Vice Chancellor at JNU during last 6 years, it was only last month that I shifted to UGC as its chairman. We introduced a BSc, MSc Ayurveda Biology in JNU. It's an interdisciplinary program. It's a multidisciplinary program actually. Ayurveda is a traditional medicine and biology is a modern science. And the professors from life science and biotechnology and molecular medicine and the professors from the School of Sanskrit, they designed this program and then they offer. Who has stopped us from doing this? In fact, many of these good things can be done on our own initiation. But however, now the national education policy is giving out some guidelines so that people have some clarity on doing this. So what are we doing in this multidisciplinarity education? We are saying that if a university like Shastra University is there, if it is more focused on science, we are saying that why don't you open schools or departments in other areas such as social sciences, languages, international relations, national security, and so on. It is very, very important, and cognitive science very clearly says that a person will become creative and innovative only when diverse thinking is brought together. And that's not happening in our universities because our credit system, our semester system is so fixed, it is so rigid, people are not able to take these kind of multidisciplinary courses. I will give you one small example, real life example, how multidisciplinary thinking actually can help us in solving many problems. When NASA wanted to send their satellite up, that satellites required energy, and this energy comes from the solar panel. The problem with solar panels is how to fold that so that you can pack it and put in the satellite and send it up. And the engineers could not find a solution. So they called a famous origami expert from Japan. And this lady, she knew how to fold paper in an efficient manner. They used her knowledge and they folded these solar panels and sent this up so that it can expand and become 10 times bigger than what its original size is. This is how, when multidisciplinarity comes in contact with each other, the real creativity comes, right? But let me also tell you another real example, and I'm giving these examples to motivate the educators here why we should emphasize on multidisciplinary education in our universities, right? A psychologist, he wanted to find out how creative ideas are generated. So he identified 4 top molecular biology labs in the world, and he set up cameras there, and he studied for 2-3 years. When you think of a molecular biology lab, what images come to your mind? Sir, what images come to your mind in a molecular biology lab? You will imagine scientists with white coats, with protective glasses, and looking through the microscopes for hours and hours, and suddenly say, Eureka, I found something. But to his surprise, the psychologist found that nothing of that sort happened. The real ideas were generated when these scientists were meeting informally in the corridors over a cup of tea, or when these scientists bounced each other and then had informal discussions and ideas flowed from one project to the other. This is the key. When we are saying that we want to make our students creative and innovative, it doesn't come by just theorizing things. You need to put it in practice. And how do you do that? By encouraging the students to learn from across the disciplines, to encourage the students to meet each other, not just only in the classroom, but outside the classroom. And these are the things that we need to introduce if we want to make our students creative and innovative. And UGC has come out with very, very clear guidelines. And I'm going to have meetings, a series of meetings, first with all the central university vice chancellors, and then state-wise with all the vice chancellors, whether they are private university vice chancellors, state government vice chancellors, all are same for us. I'm going to have series of meetings with them, handhold them, and make sure that many of our higher educational institutions will become multidisciplinary institutions.
Yes, sir, that's very positive. In fact, one thing that has to be appreciated in NEP 2020 is that it is trying to remove the distinction, or rather the discrimination between public and private institutions insofar as certain things that both of them can do well. Now, having said that, I also read the NEP 2020 again last night before coming for this session. I never found the word rankings in the entire NEP 2020 document.
He's a good teacher. He came prepared to ask me questions.
So there is no mention of the word rankings in the entire document. But we have our own NIRF ranking, which I think over a period of time can evolve to be a regional benchmark and moving forward a global benchmark.
Right.
What is your view on maybe an excessive focus on international rankings when we know for sure that there is an inherent policy bias towards certain types of institutions? Can we not, because this is the Atmanirbhar moment, can we not have our own NIRF ranking turning out to be a global ranking methodology? Why should we have to follow QS and Times? Why not make NIRF equivalent to them?
So it is one of the 5 fundamentals: quality. So how do you maintain standards of education in our country? As all of you know, we have the headquarters of NAC in Bangalore, National Assessment and Accreditation Council, right? What National NAC does is to assess the institute overall in terms of the infrastructure, the teacher-student ratio, the lab facilities, library facilities, and so on. And based on certain international standards, then they give the ranking to these higher educational institutes.
Is it ranking or ratings?
It's the rating. So what we have done during last 1 year is one fits all kind of scale really will not work in a diverse country like ours, because you have large universities, you have highly specialized universities. So we came up with multiple standards based on these globally accepted standards in order to evaluate, assess the higher educational institutes. One of the reasons why many institutes do not come for assessment and accreditation is the fear that, his university has got 3.56 and I may get 3.43, then no, it's not good in the public view. These kind of fears are also there. So that is why in the national education policy, what we are going to do is we will have a binary accreditation. Either you are accredited or you are not accredited. But we will also have an intermediate provisional accreditation. And we are inviting any college, any institution which was established even 1 year ago, they can come for this provisional accreditation, and we will tell you whether you are going in the right direction, whether you are ready for the complete accreditation. Then we will give you provisional accreditation and tell you, no, these are the areas on which you have to work, and in next 2 years you come and get accredited completely. So NAC is one. And I completely agree with him. These global rankings, putting too much of emphasis on global rankings is something that I think we need to be very, very cautious, because a university does a very, very complex function of educating our students, and just reducing the entire performance to a single number and say that some university is 88th rank, some university is 50th rank. In my view, I feel that's not a right approach. And also, if you look at, I don't know how many of you are familiar with what are the parameters used for ranking. One of the two important parameters is perception. Perception from their own peers and alumni, 40%, and 10% perception is from the employers. And it is well known in cognitive science that perception cannot be measured.
Exactly.
Right? You can only measure how some external factors are affecting your perception, but you cannot directly measure perception. Yep. So you are using some unscientific parameter in order to rank these institutes. So therefore, I think we should not put too much of emphasis. And I agree with him that we have the national institutional ranking framework, where the perception part comes only about 10%, but the remaining 90% is based on measurable parameters. So therefore, we can proudly say that today India has a ranking scheme which is really scientific. And I go by what Vaidya said. I think we need to evolve this into a global ranking system, and we will definitely do that.
See, for people who have been watching closely the media and through which we know about the work that the UGC is doing, I mean, it's not even a month since he took over as chairman of UGC, and you've seen about provisional accreditation, cluster colleges, online degrees, and there is a lot that's going to come. So as somebody who's closely associated with the ecosystem, I have a lot of questions, but I will reserve the last two questions from the students, because NEP 2020 is learner-centric, satisfying the aspirations of students. So we have time for two quick questions from the students. Please raise your hand. And no long statement, comments, your question.
But also a word of caution to the organizers. See, both of us are teachers and with microphones in front of us. So you have to stop us somewhere.
Yeah, so he is there. He is waving hands. So Prabhu Chala is good at that.
Okay.
So just a question, okay? Not a question paper. We can only give you a question paper. You
That's
just
right,
have a
sir.
question.
Okay. Good afternoon, sir. My name is Ramasubramanian. I'm a third year law student. My question is with regard to the implementation of the NEP. As you said, Venkatraman and Ananthakrishnan should walk hand in hand for this to be a success. But certain state governments, for instance, let's take Tamil Nadu government itself. So they are openly hostile to anything that comes from the center, be it NEET or NEP. So in this case, how are we going to ensure that this NEP is going to work in a smooth way with coordination between center and state? Thank you.
I'll give you one idea. I was so glad listening to the minister in Tamil language, because I was a student at IIT Madras. I can follow a little bit Tamil. One of the important things in NEP is the focus on our own Indian languages. Giving the school education in our own Indian languages. There is enough scientific research to show that when a kid is educated in her own mother tongue, the kid has the ability to become more creative, right? So why not we think about offering not just only school education, but even professional education and other degrees in our own Indian language? I'll give you an example. Let's say BTech civil engineering students, when they pass out, and if you find that many of them are actually working within Tamil Nadu, what do? They speak with their clients in Tamil. They speak with the workers who are building the house in Tamil. And if I study in Tamil, what is the problem? I can effectively communicate with those people. Let me give you another idea. If a law student is passing the law degree in Tamil Nadu I am taking as an example. It can be done in any other state. If a law student is studying law, why can't the law student study in Tamil medium? When he goes to the district court, he is arguing in Tamil, and where is the need to argue in English? And he is talking to his clients. A poor fellow, a villager, he comes and explains his problem only in Tamil. If I am educated in English in law, will I be able to appreciate the concerns of my client? I think there is a greater need now to focus on giving degrees in our own Indian languages. Of course, there are practical challenges. And as engineers, we always think about finding solutions. Yes, for everything that we want to do, there will be challenges. But we need to go around these challenges, find solutions. So do you agree with me? Why can't we study in law or other degrees in our own Tamil language? And that is part of NEP.
Yes. It is possible and efforts have started.
Right. Efforts have started, and we are working at UGC also, because we need to bring the publishers also into the entire exercise. We need to bring in the experts into this, and we need to take the inputs from the stakeholders who are the students. You know, in many of the colleges, I have studied in Telugu medium until my 12th standard. And when I moved into the college, it was like a fish out of water. All my friends were speaking in English. But then I made a determined effort to learn English, and it has not stopped me from achieving what I wanted to achieve in my life. I think we should teach our students in our own Indian languages.
Yeah, one last short question, shorter answer, please.
Right.
Yes, anybody, please. Yeah, please, the girl there.
Hello,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. This is Madhura from Great Lakes Institute of Management.
Right.
So, my question is actually a follow-up to what was being discussed in the last question as well. So, when we are talking about education in regional languages, it kind of creates a barrier in cities, like in states where the language is not spoken in majority. Obviously, we'll be working in some place closer to our own state, but still we have to travel. So that's first concern of mine. And the second concern is the previous speakers were talking about how we have to bring foreign students also into India, make it more integrated and everything.
Right.
So do you think national education policy can make it happen in terms of globalizing education that is offered in India?
My teacher, he said I had to be short in my answers. First question, less than 10% of the students actually migrate to a different state. Nearly 80 to 90% they work in their own state. Point one. Point two, when we say that we need to teach our students in our Indian languages, it is by no means we are saying that we should neglect English. English you should learn, you should master it as a communication tool, so that wherever you go out, you are able to communicate, right? So these are the two important things that you need to keep in your mind. And what's your second question?
In terms of making India the global standard for education.
How do we globalize
like
Indian
bringing in
education?
students
Internationalization.
Internationalization.
Yes.
Oh, there is a lot of effort that is going on. We are going to come up soon with the regulations for twinning, dual degrees and double degrees and so on. We will also be encouraging the foreign universities to come and set up campuses here. And we are also going to internationalize our own Indian education. Recently, we had discussions with about 15 high commissioners from 15 countries, and we found that many of the countries, they are willing to invite our teachers, our campuses to their countries. So there is going to be a cross flow of international students coming over here and our campuses going over there. And just to conclude there is one big project on which we are working now. It is the establishment of a digital university.
Yep.
This digital university will work as a hub and spoke model. And what we are going to do is we will aggregate the best of the digital resources that are available in Indian universities and also in the universities across the world. And the student has to simply go to the portal, choose a program, and undergo the training using these videos and that are present there, and undergo the assessment, the proctored assessment. And we will also include some kind of internship as part of this online education. And we will connect these students with the employers so that there is a career growth for these students. And then we will form alumni groups for these students. So right from admission to the alumni groups and taking care of their job placement, this digital university is going to revolutionize the higher education scenario in our country. There is more to talk about that. But I think my teacher is saying I should stop here.
Actually, he's an expert on both. So shorter answers, he's on stage, and for longer conversations off stage, the Professor Jagdish that we all know, he's known for that. Please engage with him. He's a walking Wikipedia. So please engage with him for longer conversations and get to know more about NEP 2020. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank
It
you.
was a
Thank
pleasure
you.
having interaction with you.